Good evening, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Shane Foley with the IMPD Public Affairs Office. I want to welcome you to our fifth of six district virtual community meetings. Tonight we're on Southeast District with Commander Hicks. In a few minutes, we're going to give him an opportunity to share some of the things that his districts and his officers are doing specifically to serve the citizens of Southeast District. And then at the end of that, we want to invite you to ask some questions. But don't wait until that time. If you would, go ahead and put those questions into the chat box on WebEx, or if you have Facebook, you can also go there. Okay, I'm hearing that we're getting some echo. Not sure why that is. But we'll go ahead and kick it over to Commander Hicks, and hopefully that'll stop. Commander?
All right, thanks, Lieutenant. I appreciate that. And yeah, welcome to the Southeast District Virtual Community Meeting. We like to say the best district in the city. You know, these meetings are super important for me to be able to share information with all of you and for us to kind of have an exchange of ideas. And honestly, we weren't able to do that as much in 2020 as we like to because obviously because of the pandemic. So I'm super excited that we're all able to get together tonight and I'm able to share some information with you. So we'll go ahead and get started. There's the agenda just briefly. We'll go over some overview of our Southeast District for those of you who may not be real familiar with the district. And we'll do some 2020 crime stats for both IMPD and Southeast District. And we'll talk about some of the officer activity and accomplishments that we had in 2020. And then we'll transition into 2021 priorities and initiatives. And then we'll have an opportunity for questions at the end of this. But before I get started with that, you know, I'm going to give you a lot of facts and figures tonight. We're going to talk about crime stats, and we're going to talk about, you know, what me and my officers do every day to combat crime and enhance the quality of living on Southeast District. But I do want to acknowledge that, you know, this was a big day with snowfall overnight and the snowfall today. I want you to know that our officers did a great job. Everybody showed up for work. Everybody came in. Everybody's been trudging through the snow. I listened to the radio and heard officers marking out, helping with slide offs, helping pushing cars out of snow drifts, giving rides to stranded motorists. So just want to let you know, we are law enforcement officers. We do enforce laws, but first and foremost, we're public servants. And I'm really, really proud of our officers and men and women that work, not only Southeast District, but all of IMPD for the good work that they did today with the snow and all of that. So now here's a map of Southeast District. We're basically the southeast portion of Marion County. So we have Meridian Street on this side, County Line Road to the south and to the east. This is Brookville Road, and then Washington Street. So it's roughly 85 square miles. We have 22 patrol beats. We have about 175,000 residents who live on our district. So it's a large district. We have a lot of really great neighborhoods and we have a lot of great businesses. And I'm proud to say that we enjoy a really great working relationship with those businesses and those community groups. And we're able to get a lot done by working together. Here are the folks that really helped me get the work done on Southeast District. I have two captains, Captain Steve Ferklick, Captain Larry Wheeler, that helped me run the district. And then we have our 5 lieutenants. We have lieutenant on day shift, middle shift, late shift. And then we have a detective lieutenant and then our impact lieutenant. Those are 5 senior members of our police department that serve as commanders for their shifts and for their units. And, you know, they take what the chief and what I want done as far as public safety and fighting crime, and they kind of put that all into motion. And then you see the sergeants underneath that work for them. Those first line supervisors are so important to getting the work done that we do as a police agency. And I remember Chief Jerry Barker once said that those first line supervisors are the backbone of the police department, and I couldn't agree more. They're the ones that are out in the field every day working with our officers, overseeing what they do, responding when they need assistance, and they really are the driving force behind what we get done on our police department. So I'm super proud of all of them as well. You see here's our number of patrol officers. Right now, we've got 144 patrol officers and detectives that work on Southeast District. You can see they're spread out amongst day, middle, and late shift. And then we have district detectives. We're actually down a little bit because we had a couple recent retirees for our district detectives. And I know Lieutenant Farron is wanting to get those replaced as soon as possible. So we're working on that. And then we have our neighborhood impact unit. That includes our vice narcotics detectives, our flex team, and our community relations officers. So total 144 officers working down here 24/7, protecting and serving the citizens of Southeast District. So now we'll just go ahead and transition into our crime statistics. I'm going to start off by going with the IMPD violent crime data. And as you can see, criminal homicides, it's not a secret to anybody that we had an increase in 2020 over 2019. It was about a 40% increase. And honestly, we set a record with 240 criminal homicides or murders, if you want to call them that. One murder is way too many, but 214 is very concerning to all of us. So, our bosses, the chiefs, are directing us to do what's necessary and whatever we can to try to drive that down. Our aggravated assaults, if you see, they were actually up a little bit as well, just over 4%. But some good news, our robberies and our rapes were actually down about 15% each. So then if you move to non-fatal shootings, which is part of that violent crime trend that we try to follow, because oftentimes the difference between having a murder and a non-fatal shooting is just the quality of care that a victim might get or where the bullet hit them on their body, whether they're able to survive or not. So again, we were, for IMPD, our non-fatal shootings were up 2020 over 2019 as well. We had 41% more incidents and 36% more victims. So where the incidents and victims differ a little bit is we apparently didn't have quite as many multiple shooting victims at each incident as maybe we had the year before. So that increase wasn't quite as high. So that's where you get the 41 and 36%. If you look at IMPD overall preliminary property crime data, we actually did pretty well there. So if you look, our burglaries citywide, we're down 26.5%. Our larcenies were down 19. Our vehicle thefts, we were up about 4.5%. And our arsons were up as well. Didn't want to mention vehicle theft just for a second while we're here. We've seen an increase in vehicle theft on Southeast District as well. And, a lot of them, probably not the majority, but a lot of those are people letting their cars warm up in the morning or leaving them run in at the gas station when they just run in for a minute and somebody jumps in their car and takes off. So please, if you're going to warm up your car in the morning before you go to work, I'd encourage you to have a second set of keys so you can lock your car while it's warming up. Because most of the time, people, if it's unlocked, they'll get in it and take it. If it's locked, they'll go on down the street. So please help us out a little bit if we'd like to see that number go down some. So if you can kind of help us with not leaving your cars running, that would be helpful. And if you look at where all that ends up at the end of the day, our overall crime data, excuse me, I'm not sure why that's popping up. The overall violent crime, if you take everything together, I know our homicides were up, but if you look at the robberies and the aggravated assaults and all of that, when you add all that together, we were actually down in overall violent crime in Indianapolis, about 3.5%. Property crime, we did even better. We were down about 11.5% there. So add all that together, and our overall crime in Indianapolis was down 8.64%. So again, we always strive to do better. We think we can do better, but we always will be happy when we see those things decrease a little bit. And then this is just another graph, another way of showing those same numbers that we just looked at with IMPD. But I like looking at this one because it gives a 7-day, a 28-day, and a year-to-date comparison. So I can see what we've done year-to-date now versus last year when we get these reports. And I can also go back and say, well, how are those things trending in the last 28 days or even the last week? So that's how I see spikes in like vehicle thefts or arsons or assaults. And then we can kind of immediately address those and say, why did we have a spike in those the last week or the last month? So that's a very helpful tool that we get from our data people, and I wanted to share that with you. And if you want to look at where we did the same thing, Southeast District, so this is our numbers for Southeast District for last year. And if you look at the murders, since we talked about those, Southeast District, we had 17 of the 214 murders that we had last year, which was actually a decrease. If you look up prior, we had 21 the year before, which that's actually a little bit high for us. I don't want to see any, but 21 was pretty high last year. So I'm happy that we're at least down on that. So our 17 out of 214 means that on Southeast District, we had about 8% of the murders that happened in Marion County. And then our non-fatal shooting data, same thing. We had 73 of those on Southeast District out of the 672 that we had citywide. So we had about 11% of all the non-fatal shootings that happened here in Southeast District. This is another way of looking at it. So this is a data point that we get. If you look at the map, the stars represent the 17 murders that we had last year, and the triangles are the 73 non-fatal shootings that we had. And if you look, a lot of that is concentrated up here in the northwest corner of our district. For those of you who know this area well, that's our most densely populated area of the district. Still, if you get out here in Franklin Township, there's a lot of great neighborhoods, but there's still some farm fields and open place. So this is where a lot of our violent crime is taking place. And to kind of highlight that, we also track our shots fired runs. If you're sitting at home and you hear shots being fired in your neighborhood, people will call those in. And we send officers out to check to see what's going on with those. We actually had 1,815 of those calls last year. If you look, you can see it's the same areas where we're experiencing most of our violent crime, and most of our crime, quite frankly, in general, is in that same area. So that's important for me and for our supervisors to look at, because again, this tells us where we need to be paying attention to, and where we've got extra manpower today after everything's filled. This is the area the lieutenants and the sergeants should be assigning those extra people. And each one of these is pretty indicative of some type of crime, because most legal responsible gun owners don't go out and just fire their guns off indiscriminately. So these dots all represent probably some type of criminal activity, whether maybe it's just somebody who's illegally possessing a gun. But that's a pretty telling slide for us, and we pay attention to that every month. Now we'll talk about some individual stuff on our Southeast District and our Neighborhood Impact Unit and our district detectives. Again, our Neighborhood Impact Unit are real proactive units that go out and try to affect crime every day. Our beat officers are pretty busy responding to radio runs, and then they'll do their community policing and intervention stuff in between those radio runs. But our Neighborhood Impact people kind of devote their full time to just trying to drive down our crime. And the first one I'll talk about is our flex team. Here's some of the stats that they did. Last year, they were responsible for 741 investigations. They made over 1,200 traffic stops. Here again, our stolen vehicles, they recovered 201 stolen vehicles. Some of those recoveries would have had somebody in it where they made an arrest for the stolen vehicle, but most of those were probably, we found the vehicle after the fact, after whoever stole it was finished with it and left it somewhere. This is a big important number for us, because every illegal gun that we can get off the street, I firmly believe, helps us reduce crime. So our flex team recovered 44 guns last year. They made 140 felony arrests, plus all these other arrests. So a very active team. I couldn't do my job without them. If a neighbor or citizen calls in and says, hey, I'm having a problem in my neighborhood, these are the guys I usually call up. Sergeant Kibbe and said, hey, can you help us out? Here's a problem we're having. And he'll go out and address that. Again, our flex team works very closely with our narcotics unit. This is some of the stats that they did. Sergeant Hemphill and his group did a fantastic job again last year. You can see where they recovered 100 guns. Most of these are recoveries from search warrants that they do. But again, every gun that we can take off the street helps us, I think. So they did recovered 100 guns. They served 19 search warrants, and then they did search warrants of phones, cars, and other things. They did 41 of those. And then look at this. They recovered almost $142,000 in cash from people that they encountered. And they recovered over 50,000 grams of cocaine, fentanyl, heroin, meth. Drugs are a big problem in our community. So again, our narcotics unit is a very valuable tool, and I appreciate all of their hard work. This is just an example of some of the things that the flex narcotics officers did. These are pictures that they took from search warrants that they did. You can see 3 common areas on search warrants is we usually almost always find guns, always find drugs, and we usually find money with that. Well, not always find drugs, but usually we find drugs. So guns, money, and drugs are very prevalent when we serve these warrants. That's why we're serving the warrants. And we had some good success with that last year. Here's some more examples of that. Again, you can see, these drug dealers are pretty heavily armed, and they can pose a real danger to our officers. So again, every one of them that we can get off the street, in my book, is a big win for us. Now our district detectives handle cases like they do handle gun cases. They do assaults, gun crimes, burglaries, the auto thefts, the thefts. For most of last year, we had 13 detectives working in the unit. They took 4,362 cases, which worked out to about 335 cases apiece. That's a pretty heavy caseload. We also had some of our light duty officers and our district detective aide who took 1,988 calls and phone calls back to people talking about their cases, and also for a total of 6,350 cases. Our detectives worked very hard. They had a really good clearance rate. I'm really proud of them. And I will say this, that I found that victims appreciate when their victimizers are held accountable. I'll tell you, I get a lot more calls about our burglaries and thefts than I do even our murders in a lot of cases, because more people are affected by people breaking into their car or their house or their business than they're affected by the murders. So proud of our detectives as well. Our behavioral health unit, this is something that was started in our department a few years ago. This is basically where we have a police officer assigned with a crisis counselor from Eskenazi. And it's been a very successful program. They really support our officers on runs that involve people with mental health issues. So if an officer gets a run and someone there maybe is not taking their medication like they're supposed to, or a family calls and says, hey, we've got a family member who seems pretty out of control and it's not adjusting with their mental health situation, then our behavioral health unit will go out. If you see last year, they made 77 home visits. They made 830 phone calls. And then if you add this up, they did, it's at 60 or referrals, almost 150 referrals from officers or citizens that they went out on. And again, every time that we can keep a uniformed police officer from having to go and do those things, it frees them up to do other things on the district. So plus these folks have a little more training and are a little bit better equipped to deal with these. Usually they give them information on services that are provided in the community for folks that are having mental health crises. So it's another great unit that we're very proud of. So now I want to talk about some of the other accomplishments and activities that we had. So we did go through a beat reconfiguration last year. As our manpower increased, we were finally able to increase our beats back to where close to, actually above where it was in the past. So we went from 15 beats to 22 beats. Those smaller beats allow our officers to stay in a more confined area longer, and it gives them a better opportunity to engage with the community members in that area, which is the foundation of community policing. It's a partnership with the police officers in the community. So the more interaction they can have, the better it is for everybody. If you build that relationship and then we have a violent crime there, people are a lot more prone to give information to an officer that they know and trust or have gotten to know a little bit than they do just an officer walking up and asking them if they've seen or heard anything. So those relationships are very, very important. We also IMPD went through a promotion process last year, and I'm happy to say that 3 of our patrol officers were recently promoted to sergeant. 2 of our sergeants were promoted to lieutenant, and then I have 1 more sergeant who's on the cusp of being promoted, and I expect that she'll be promoted later this year. So kudos to those officers. Those are very competitive processes, and for them to do that well speaks highly of them, and I'm very proud of them. We also had a sergeant and 2 officers that graduated from our leadership academy. All of our uniformed officers and sergeants are now equipped with body-worn cameras. I'm sure most of you saw that take place on the news, but we're happy to say that so far that seems to be going well. I've had personally no complaints on anything the officers have done. And now we can go back and look at body-worn camera. If there is a complaint, it's very helpful to us as supervisors in kind of figuring out what happened there. So now I get to brag a little bit about our officers. So we had an officer-involved shooting back in September. Officers Layton and Berkebile responded to a disturbance with a gun incident. As they were arriving on scene, exiting their vehicles, they actually saw a male suspect shoot a female in front of them. He then ran towards a car. They engaged him at that time, and when he pointed his weapon at one of the officers, they shot him and wounded him. Pretty chaotic scene. There was probably about 20 people out there. The officers didn't know if there was maybe another shooter involved or not. They did a great job of maintaining that. Other officers arrived. They quickly transitioned into a life-saving mode, provided first aid to the gentleman that they had shot, provided first aid to the woman that he had shot, and then they found out that there was a second woman who had been shot prior to their arrival. So now they've got a total of 3 victims of a gunshot wound that they were treating. And I'm happy to say that all 3 of those victims did survive. But it was due to the quick action of these officers and the other officers that came over to help them. So really proud of them for taking care of business. They did what they had to do, and then they quickly transitioned into life-saving. And I don't have any doubt that more people probably would have been shot had those officers not been on scene and took the action that they took. So kudos to them. And then this incident actually made national news. These officers were nearby and heard a radio run that came out of a car with 4 teenagers in it, had ran off the road down on Fry Road, down on the southeast portion of our district. Ran off the road, crashed into a tree, and then their car ended up in a retention pond. The car was actually about 30 feet or 35 feet out into the middle of the pond away from the shore, and it was completely submerged in 12 feet of water. 2 of the teenagers were able to get out of the car, but 2 were trapped inside the car. So Sergeant Carver and Officer Stewart, Snowden, Hashley, and Allen arrived on the scene very quickly. Officer Allen was one of the first officers there, quickly took off his gear, jumped in the water, swam out to the car, located it, not even sure how he located it in 12 feet of water. And we all know how murky retention ponds are. Located it, and then he made a series of dives down into the car. It took him several times before he could locate anybody. But he located one of the teens kind of floating up against the roof of the car. He was able to drag that teen out, pass it off to the other officers, who immediately started life-saving measures for that teen. Officer Allen went back out, completely exhausted at this point. Officer Hashley went with him. Officer Allen did some more dives and was able to recover the second victim and hauled him to shore. So these officers did great work. Unfortunately, one of those teens did not survive, but the other one did. And it's nothing short of a miracle that both those teens were underwater for a long period of time. And these heroic officers were quick to action, jumped in, saved those teenagers. And this is an award ceremony that Chief Taylor and Assistant Chief Bailey and Chief Barker came out and participated in, and we were able to award these officers with unit department awards for their heroic action. So really proud of them as well. This is something we do every month here on Southeast District. We award an Officer of the Month, so any supervisor or officer can nominate a fellow officer for the good work that they've done, and then we recognize them with a plaque and some goodies that some of our fine businesses down here donate for Officer of the Month. So that's some of the officers that recently been awarded Officer of the Month, so really proud of them. And community engagement. Again, community engagement is a really important piece for what we do down here. We try to get out in the community as much as possible because, again, we're not just law enforcement officers, we're public servants. And that's how we view our jobs. And, here down here in the bottom corner, you see that this was our middle shift officers. They became aware of a family. I was actually an officer on North District, made them aware of a family that was struggling. And they were able to help go over and present them with some Christmas presents that they otherwise may not have had. And then I always want to mention Mike and Debbie Laird. Jake Laird was an officer that working down here on our district, and it was killed in the line of duty on August 18th of 2004. Every shift holds a roll call on that date at the location where Jake was killed. And oftentimes Mike and Debbie Laird come out and sharing that with us. So we're able to do that again this year. And then, these are 5-year certificates and pins. For every 5 years of service that you have on the police department, you get a star. So getting your first star is a pretty important thing. So we're really happy to be able to be with these officers to award them their first star and their certificate for 5 years of service for the IMPD. So now we'll go a little bit about our philosophy and our strategy down here. Beat policing, again, is a very important part of that. We expect every officer to do his or her part, but we encourage innovation, proactivity, and teamwork. And we know that our goals are only achieved if we work hard, we work smart, and we relentlessly follow up on the things that we're supposed to be doing. So we take all that in, and down at the bottom, you can see community involvement's essential to that. We've often say that police officers can't do this alone. If we want to make our community better, we've got to have help from the public. So community involvement is essential. So what we do is we try to target the persons, places, and behaviors that are causing us problems on the district. People ask, what do you mean by persons, places, and behaviors? It's really just the people who we identify as being involved in mostly violent crimes, but serious crimes on our district. Those are the persons that we'll try to keep an eye on. The places are identified locations where crime occurs. It can be an individual house, it can be a street, it can be a neighborhood, it can be a business. It's just a place that keeps popping up on our radar and sucking up police resources. And the behaviors are things like drug abuse, robberies, thefts, people who are having behaviors that are, again, causing us to spend a lot of police resources on that. So that's kind of how we target what we go after. And to that end, we produce what we call a daily crime action report every day. Supervisors will send a summary in on any unusual or serious incident that they have. And then we have a strategic intelligence officer that comes in every day, and he prepares a report that he sends out to every officer on the district so that they have an idea of what's happened crime-wise in the last 24 hours, any trends that we're seeing, if there's extra patrols needed in an area because we had a shooting or a homicide or something, then we put all that in the report. And then we send that out to all of our officers, and then they kind of know what they should be paying attention to that day. And then here's kind of how it looks. This was kind of a light day, but all of those dots on there represent one of these categories over there. So we send that out. So if an officer working in this area, he kind of has an idea of what's happened in his area the last 24 hours. This is something else that we send out each day, a stolen vehicle hot sheet. This is for the entire city. If a car was stolen in the last 24 hours, then our officers know that, and they can kind of keep a lookout for that. Then we do our hotspot policing. So our hotspot policing basically is any area that showing us that we've had an increase in violence or criminal activity in that area, then that becomes a hotspot for us. And then we'll try to pay attention to that to try to figure out why is that all of a sudden being a hotspot when it wasn't last month or last week or whenever. Again, it can be a neighborhood, a street, a house, or a business. And this is kind of what it looks like. This is a citywide map again. But you can see all these really red spots are where it was really hot. This is along Washington Street for us and East District. And then you see the yellow areas are not quite as urgent as the red areas, but they still are areas that we know we need to be paying attention to. And here's another one, just an idea. This was robbery data that I just picked from a week in January. And again, you can see we had a series of robberies down here. So we knew that we needed to pay attention. A lot of these were Family Dollar and Dollar General stores that were being hit. So obviously we started paying extra attention to those, trying to prevent any more robberies from happening. We also employed directed patrols. That's basically where officers go into and conduct high visibility patrols in some of our known hotspot areas. It could be a vehicle patrols, bike patrols, or foot patrols when weather permits. In fact, we really encourage our officers to get out on foot or on bikes as much as possible because it takes them out of the car, makes them more accessible to the community. So again, and we expect them to go in there and do enforcement activities to kind of address the problems that we're having. But it's not zero tolerance policing. We did that many times throughout my career where we just go into an area with a bunch of police officers and stop everything that was moving. We don't do that anymore. We found it not to be very effective. So now we found that we're better off targeting specifically persons, places, and behaviors that are causing problems. And sometimes just this directed patrol, just a marked police car or a uniformed police officer and be in an area is a crime suppression. If I'm driving down the street and a guy's out there thinking about breaking into a car, maybe he sees my police car and decides not to break into the car. So that's why we encourage our officers to be out and about as much as possible. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about the COVID-19 pandemic that we've all been going through. It was a rough year in 2020 for both the residents of Indianapolis and first responders in particular. Um, we weren't immune from that. Our officers, we have thousands of contacts with the public every year. Every month, thousands of contacts with the public. So we knew it was inevitable that we would have some officers contract COVID-19 or at least be exposed either at home or at work to the point where they had to quarantine for a while and be away from work. So we did our best to take some measures to prevent that from happening. Some of the things that we did was we made sure the department did a really great job, in my opinion, of providing personal protective equipment like masks, gloves, hand sanitizers to all the officers. We also are taking more reports over the phone now, so officers don't have to go into people's homes and expose them or the officer. We're also had some employees that worked from home, and then we've limited some of the access. Usually our roll call is wide open for people to come in. We've limited that now. It's pretty much appointment only if you want to come in. So I think all those things added up. I think we did a really good job of minimizing the impact from COVID-19 on our workforce. I will say there was never a time where our district was shorthanded because we had too many people out with COVID-19. So proud of that accomplishment as well. But that's what I think about COVID-19. If you didn't catch that, we just like to do away with that completely and move on. So what are our priorities for 2021? Again, they're going to be much the same as what they've been for 2020. We're not going to reinvent the wheel on things that were successful. We'll continue those with constant tweaks to those to make them better. We're going to continue to partner with our other city agencies to address problems like homelessness and the opioid epidemic that we have. The 201 and 203 zip codes, which encompass part of the Southeast District, they've led the county in recent years in the number of opioid overdoses. Our officers take runs on overdoses every single day, and it's pretty sad. We've had way too many deaths for that. So we're trying to do our best that we can to try to reduce that somewhat. We're still going to go after illegally possessed firearms, and we're going to either prosecute those through the U.S. Attorney's Office, so federal crime, or the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, whichever one. Hopefully we can get the most time in prison for our offenders, because it helps when certain people just have to be off the street from time to time. So we're going to keep pushing that. And again, we want to resume our in-person community meetings. Again, that's very, very important to what we do out here. So we're looking forward to getting back to that post-COVID. And then on a personal note for our employees, we want to continue to allow them to do temporary details into other units around the police department to kind of help their professional growth, attend trainings when they can, and that type of thing. So Southeast District posture for 2021, our 3 primary patrol shifts will continue with their beat policing efforts, with an emphasis on reducing violence and enhancing quality of life in our neighborhoods. Again, that's the root of community policing, is getting back to our beat policing. Our narcotics unit, we're going to even more narrowly focus them, just have a laser focus on the violence that's happening on our district, and targeting the violent offenders that are causing issues, and any nexus that a drug investigation has to violent crime, that's going to move up to the top of their list. We're actually going to rename our narcotics unit this year and call them our Violent Crimes Task Force. We're going to give them a couple of more resources as far as manpower goes, and embolden them even more to go out and make more investigations to hopefully help reduce even further the crime on our district. Our flex team is going to continue to go after our most problematic persons, places, behaviors. Our community resource unit, which is our arm that leads our community outreach efforts. They'll continue to do that. They'll also continue activities revolving around our violence. So if we have a violent occurrence on our district, our community relations officers will follow up on that in the next day or two to kind of touch base with the families that were affected by that, to see if they need any resources, or there's anything that we can do to help them and or prevent any further violence from occurring. So again, the mantra, and I think it was Deputy Chief Bailey who coined this phrase, we're going to ask ourselves every single day, what are we doing to address the violence today? That's been what we're charged with doing, and that's what we're going to do in 2021. So after all of that, I think it's time to take some questions. Lieutenant Foley, if you're ready to go, I'm ready to go.
Yes, sir, I am ready. Looks like we've only got one question right now, so before I ask that question, I encourage anybody who has additional questions. Commander Hicks was very thorough in his presentation, so maybe there won't be that many. But go ahead and put those into the chat box, and we'll get to as many as we can. So it looks like now we have two questions, so that's a good start. First question we have is, when will IMPD reps be allowed to rejoin neighborhood association meetings, both virtual and in person?
Yeah, well, the virtual meetings, we should be attending those now. So if we're getting invitations for virtual meetings, I've attended a few. We certainly could be on virtual meetings now. We're all working, and there's no reason why we can't. The in-person meetings, we hope to start getting back into those very shortly. The recent spike that we've had in COVID-19 seems to be waning now. So we'll get back to those as soon as we can. What we don't want to do is I don't want to do it too early in that we expose any of our officers to the virus or anyone else. So we're a little hesitant to get back right away, but we're slowly transitioning into that. So hopefully very soon we'll be back to going to all of the in-person meetings. I know a lot of our community groups here on Southeast District are still doing virtual meetings. So once they get back to their in-person meetings, hopefully we'll be ready to go and be able to join in person.
Next question is from retired Lieutenant Don Bender. Thank you for joining us, sir. Chief, after the COVID pandemic is over, will Southeast consider a small personalized citizens academy for the residents in Southeast District? Just a couple of evenings going into more detail about what the patrol officers and detectives do and how citizens can be of greater assistance to both officers and detectives.
Yeah, sure. We're always open to that. As you know, the good lieutenant, you've ran a lot of those types of programs in the past. I know we do a Citizens Academy for IMPD as a whole, but we're certainly open to doing something here on the district. We've done a lot of various trainings here just on Southeast District, so we're obviously open to those types of opportunities. And like you say, Lieutenant, the more that we can interact with folks and the more that we can work together, the better it is for all of us. It's not, police versus the citizens or the police can do it all. It's got to be teamwork if we're going to improve things here in Marion County.
Chief?
Yes, sir.
Would you consider an old retired officer coming back and helping out a couple of evenings?
Well, I'm counting on it. That's why I thought you asked the question. Absolutely, you're in. Count on it. I still have your phone number. You're in.
Okay.
I'm going to call upon you. And honestly, Lieutenant Bender was gracious enough to join our Community Resource District Council. If you're not familiar with that, every district has a Community Resource District Council. They're a group of people that we go to when we are having crime problems and let them know what's going on, ask for their help. And then they have their groups that they interact with, so that can very quickly spread across our district. So Lieutenant, thanks for being a part of that. I know that your 40 years of experience on our police department is very helpful to that council, and I appreciate your efforts.
Next question is, what are the two zip codes mentioned for high drug use?
Yeah, 46201 and 46203. I haven't seen numbers yet from last year, but you probably get them from the Marion County Health Department. They track that type of stuff, and you'll see that there's a bad problem. Honestly, it's not great anywhere in Marion County, but we tend to have a more serious problem down here than some other areas. It's very concerning to us, and we spend a lot of resources on trying to improve that situation. I know Debbie Conway, who's on here today, she had a personal family tragedy with that, so she's been very engaged with opioid stuff now, and I went and attended some training that she's done as far as Narcan and other things, and I know that she's planning on doing more of that this year. So if anybody's interested in that, we post that stuff on our Facebook page and our Southeast District social media platform, so we'll post more of that this year. Hopefully with COVID waning, we'll get back to doing more of that because it really is important stuff.
Commander, obviously, we know that beat officers change by shift and change by day and letter day and whatnot, so it might be helpful for people to understand what that looks like. question is, where is there a place where we can find out who our assigned beat officers are?
Yeah, I don't know that we have that listed anywhere, but if you want to call up here and ask us, we can certainly tell you that. Yeah, and you will have an assigned beat officer for every shift, day, middle, and late shift. Obviously, they have days off, so that particular officer may not be working that particular day, and there might be another officer filling in for that spot for him. But yeah, we have one assigned. So if you want to call our main number here, 317-327-6300. And if you just want to leave a message or ask, I'll certainly be able to get back with you on that. Or if you just want to email me at ronald.hicks@indy.gov. Ask me who your beat officer is, give me your address, and I'll easily be able to tell you who your beat officers are.
Commander, if we know, was there an increase in overdoses on Southeast District this year? And if so, do we know how much that was?
Yeah, I have not seen the data for 2020 yet, so I don't know how that compares to 2019. But anecdotally, I can tell you because I see all the reports, we had a lot. We had a lot of overdoses. We had a lot of overdose deaths. So yeah, it still is a big problem. Suicides. We had a lot of suicides last year as well. And I know there's starting to be some talk about the pandemic and depression and that type of thing. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I did see a lot of suicides and a lot of overdoses on the district last year.
Rose has an interesting question. She said, are there really 3 separate districts with 3 commanders?
3 separate districts. Well, we actually have 6. So we have 6 separate districts on the police department, and we have a commander in charge of each of those districts. And it has to be that way because, like I said earlier, we have an 85 square mile district down here, 175 supervisors and officers, and 175,000 residents. So I wouldn't want to be much bigger than that and having one commander trying to do that. So that's why it's broken down into 6 divisions around the city. And yes, each one of those districts is headed by a commander. Hope that
Kristen
answers it.
said, I heard a lot of violence concerning guns and drugs. What about domestic violence? What service providers have noticed increase dramatically during COVID-19? And does IMPD respond to, well, we do respond to domestic violence. More like, how does IMPD respond to domestic violence? And what services are offered to women or men for that matter?
Yeah, we respond to every domestic violence incident, and we do encounter a lot of domestic violence incidents, not just on Southeast District, but around the city as a whole. We have a separate domestic violence unit that's in the investigations division of the police department, and they are the ones that investigate domestic violence incidents. So my detectives here on the district don't investigate those, but obviously we're very familiar with domestic violence incidents and how that works. And there are a lot of services that can be provided, and our domestic violence detectives share that with domestic violence victims. We also have victim assistance officers who come out and they provide resources and information, and they're very experienced. Most of them have been doing this for a number of years, so they can certainly provide a lot of information for domestic violence victims. And I would say if you're a person now or you know somebody who's experiencing domestic violence, call and report it. Because in my experience, it usually doesn't get better, it only gets worse. The person really has to remove themselves from that bad situation if they hope to get any relief from it, honestly. So I hope that answers the question thoroughly. If not, email me and I'll direct you in the right place.
Someone said, where can we find the stats that were shared today? We've got good news for you on that. This presentation will be uploaded to the IMPD YouTube page. So if anybody wasn't able to be with us today and wants to watch the presentation, they can do that, and all the slides will be posted as you saw them online. Next question's from Rose. Does Southeast start at Sherman Drive and East Washington Street?
Well, we go up to Washington Street, so Sherman Drive at Washington Street. Anything south of Washington Street at Sherman Drive is on us. But we actually go all the way out to Emerson, and then that's when it transitions on Emerson down to Brookville Road, and then we cut down. So East District has everything north of Brookville Road at Emerson. So yeah, Washington to Sherman portion of that intersection is on us, but we share that intersection with East District.
see. The next question is, I have a house where I suspect drug activity and report it to IMPD. Can you explain what the process is? Would the flex team be a part of an investigation?
Yes, absolutely. I would encourage you to report that. You can call 262-TIPS and report that drug activity that you see. I would ask that you be as specific as possible as you can. If you call the TIPS line and just say, hey, there's a drug dealing occurring in the 1100 block of South Shelby Street, really doesn't give us a lot to go on. But if you can say there's drug activity happening at a specific address, 1150 Shelby Street, and it's happening between 10 o'clock and midnight, 10 o'clock in the evening and midnight, and it always involves a black pickup truck, and give a description of the people who are involved, that's a lot that we can deal with. And every single one of those tips that come in, we look at. Lieutenant Green, who is in charge of our neighborhood impact unit, him and Sergeant Gard, our community relations sergeant, they triage every single one of those complaints, and we look at all of them. So call it in, we'll investigate it. I will caution that, especially with like narcotics investigations, those can take some time because you've got to do some surveillance, got to do some certain investigative techniques to be able to get enough evidence to either serve a search warrant or make some arrests. So I always caution people that if you call it in today, don't expect to see much different tomorrow. But that doesn't mean we're not working on it. And you can always follow up with your complaint by calling us here. And I think the next slide, we're going to show some contact information. Call us here and we can give you an update on what we're doing with your particular tip or issue that you've sent to us.
Commander, can you speak to the relationship that you have with Beech Grove and how either you and the chief work together, how the officers work together to combat some of the problems?
Yeah, no, we have a great relationship with Beech Grove because if you know the area well, you can tell that Beech Grove kind of sits right in the middle of our district. So we surround Beech Grove. We have a really good working relationship with the chief and his top management over there. Our officers get along great. Obviously, we share boundaries. So from time to time, we will help each other on runs. Even though they're a completely separate police department, we work really great together. And if an officer needs assistance, we're right there for Beech Grove and they're right there for us. And we're really proud of that working relationship. But yeah, we have a great relationship with Beech Grove.
Kristen said, I appreciate addressing the recent increase in car thefts and reminder for people not to leave their cars running. What about smaller crimes like catalytic converter or package thefts? There have been more reports, maybe people using cameras. How can they assist with that?
Yes, yeah, those are all great things. Catalytic converters, we have had an uptick in those across the city. They kind of ebb and flow. You'll get a rash of those, and then we won't have any for a couple of months, and then they come back on. So I would encourage you to obviously make a report if yours happens to get cut off and stolen from you. The package thieves, same thing. We have actually caught a lot of those package thieves, and usually that's because somebody's got a Ring doorbell or some other kind of surveillance. We get a really good picture of the suspect and or their vehicle in those cases. And again, our district detectives investigate those cases, and they've done a really great job. We have made some arrests in those. Larcenies from vehicles, we had a bunch of those last year as well. So again, I would encourage people not to leave items exposed in their car. If you're going to run into the gym and you've got a book bag or a laptop sitting on the seat of your car, somebody's likely to bust your window out and steal it while you're inside working out. You could get a number of those. So same thing if you're parking your car in front of your house overnight. If you've got items inside you don't want stolen, I would encourage you to take the extra time to haul them in the house. We'll get work trucks broken into fairly regularly where a construction worker leaves all of his power tools in his truck, and unfortunately they get stolen overnight. So we hate that, and we work hard to try to solve those cases, but you can kind of help yourself not be a victim, and we would appreciate that as well.
And we appreciate the feedback. We love hearing compliments about the work that we're doing, the work that officers are doing. I put a link in the chat to, if you have an experience with an officer, whether it's somebody taking a run, whether it's just somebody being present, encourage you to send that in as a compliment. People certainly find opportunities to tell us when we do wrong, but we love to hear about the great things that our officers are doing that we may not know about so we can compliment them. As Commander mentioned, some of the officers of the month, we love finding opportunities to recognize those officers. This next one is an interesting one, sir, because as IMPD PIO, we get people sending in their essentially police reports to us as if it's the proper format for reporting a crime. And this one says, many of my neighbors report thefts on Nextdoor app. They also report being laughed at when they try to report the incidents to the police. Many have video and neighbors have identified involved persons. Do officers monitor the Nextdoor app at all? And what more, if anything, can residents do to help police apprehend these individuals? Most thefts are locked and out of sight. And I'll go ahead and put the phone number for our dispatch in here so that way people can call 911 and for the non-emergency number, which I think is maybe on your slide as well.
Yeah, so Sergeant Guard, our community relations supervisor, he does monitor Nextdoor apps, so he will see those things on there and he'll respond back. But that's not a way to report crime. If you've got a crime that you want to report, you need to call the police department or our dispatch and report it. If it's an emergency situation, obviously you call 911. If it's not, you call 317-327-3811. to report something that's not in progress, if you will. So if you come out and your car's been broken into overnight, call that 3811 number and an officer will come out and take a report. Or in some cases now you can make that report over the phone. Doesn't matter if you make it in person or over the phone, that case will be looked at. Our booking sergeant sees all the cases. He assigns that to either a detective or the detective aide, and they will follow up on the case to see if there's anything that we can do to identify a suspect. So I would strongly encourage you to report all of those crimes. But if you're just getting on Nextdoor app and reporting it there, that's not making a police report. And I would say Nextdoor app, I think, is a valuable tool. But a lot of times, Sergeant Guard has seen a lot of information on improper or wrong information on the Nextdoor app, because obviously we'll know what took place in certain crimes, and people will be on Nextdoor app saying what they think happened, which is nowhere near what really happened. So I would caution you a little bit on the Nextdoor app, but it is a good tool for neighbors to see what's happening in their neighborhood. But I would strongly encourage you to call us. Again, you can always call our front desk, 327-6300, and ask for either a detective sergeant, a community relations officer, me, one of my captains. We'd be more than happy to answer any question that you have or address any concerns that you have.
Commander, can you walk us through a little bit about what that process happens when somebody calls and say they make a report about theft from their porch, and an officer comes out and takes the report and they've got a Ring video? Does the officer get that video, or does that go to somebody else who then uses that to try to identify a suspect?
Yeah, typically the officer himself will not get that. The reporting officer will come out. He'll take all of the information. The victim will tell them that they've got a Ring recording of it or some video recording of the incident. The officer will put that in his report. Again, the booking sergeant will see that when he gets it the next morning. He'll sign that to a detective. The detective will read the report. He will see that there is some video evidence that needs to be collected. And then the detective generally will go out and review that video, talk to the victim, and collect that evidence. And then it's up to the detective to then go out and investigate that. And again, I've got great detectives on my district. My detective sergeants are very experienced, and my detective lieutenant's been down here for more than a decade. He's the best in the business. So those cases do get investigated. And if anyone has an issue with that, they're more welcome to call me, and we'll address it if you think your case is not being looked at.
Somebody had a question about the district boundaries, so I'm hopefully this works out correctly. I went ahead and in the chat put a link to the Southeast District boundaries, so you can go ahead and click on that link and it'll give you the exact boundaries for the district. Nicole said, I work for Voices Corporation in Southeast District. We work with system impacted youth. Are officers aware that they may make references to us and other community-based resources for youth who may benefit from wraparound services to the community?
Yeah, I have visited that. I'm not super familiar with it, to be honest with you. And what they've done the last year with COVID and all, we haven't been as engaged as we'd like to have been. But again, if you would please email me the information, we're more than happy to send people to those wraparound services. Because again, law enforcement, we can only do so much. We have to rely on our private partners and other agencies within city government to help us with those. So if you've got something you think will be beneficial, please send it to me and we'll take a look at it.
So last call for any questions. I hope I didn't miss any. Some of them were different questions, but kind of covered the same topics about thefts from vehicles or thefts from porches. So if you have any last questions, go ahead and enter those in right now. I want to give everybody a preview next Thursday. So on the 25th at 6 o'clock p.m., we're going to be hosting another virtual. This Thursday we have one with North District. That'll be our last district virtual community meeting. But following Thursday, there will be another virtual meeting to introduce the Community Engagement Bureau, new bureau for IMPD that's going to elevate the engagement that our officers have with various segments of the community. Not to say that that doesn't already occur on the districts, as our officers every day engage with the community. But Commander Ida Williams is going to be running that bureau, and it's an opportunity to engage with her and her team, some of the efforts that they're going to do. We got one last question we'll ask. There's been a decrease in racing on Madison. Thank you. This is greatly appreciated by our neighborhood. Are there plans to keep addressing that problem this year?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, everybody knows that the cruisers and the drag racers on Madison Avenue, Southeast Street's a decades-old problem. I grew up here in Marion County, so we used to do that when I was a teenager. But yeah, it's gotten worse in recent years with the very loud motorcycles and cars racing up and down Madison Avenue and Southeast Street. So we came up with something we called Operation Red Flag, because if you're a race fan, red flag means that you've got to stop racing and cease your activity. So we came up with that and we implemented that very heavily the last couple of summers. And this past summer, it was very, very effective. And again, Lieutenant Green kind of came up with that model and put it into place, but then he left it to the patrol officers. The officers are out there working every day and encountering the problem. He said, run with this and see what you can do. And boy, they came up with all kinds of great ideas, all kinds of initiatives. We supported them 100% on all of it. Chief Barker, my boss, supported us 100% on it. We had other city agencies that helped out with that. And we really I had very few complaints about the racers and the cruisers this past year due to the good work and the initiative of those beat police officers. So again, it works exactly like we want it to, from the ground up, not from me sending everything down. We hope it comes from the ground up. And if I can, Lieutenant, just the last thing I'll say is that I can't be more proud. I've been with this department for 31 years, and we have an excellent police department. So I hope the community members that are on here tonight know that your officers, and they are your officers, work really hard for you each and every day. And they're just low-key public servants for the most part that want to come out, do a good job, and do the right thing. We make mistakes once in a while, and we're held accountable for that. But it's a very, very good police department. I couldn't be more proud to be one member of this police department, and who happens to be a commander of Southeast District right now. So thanks everybody for being here tonight. Thank you, Lieutenant, for hosting it. I really enjoy these types of interactions, and thank you.
I was going to ask if you have any closing words, but those were some excellent closing words, sir. So we appreciate your time tonight. Appreciate everybody who joined us. And if anybody who might be in the community wants to hear what Commander Wally has to say from North District, you can join us there on Thursday night. And then the following Thursday, we'll be with Commander Ida Williams with the Community Engagement Bureau. There's some contact information there of emergency, non-emergency numbers of different ways you can reach people on Southeast District. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and have a great evening.